What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. Boy, do I have an exciting one for you today. Even though it doesn't come with great news, it actually has a silver lining, and that's that it will serve as one of the most powerful learning experiences that I've had in a very long time here on the channel. And yes, I do still learn, for those wondering. I learn all the time, and a prime example of that was a wake-up call with my peaches. Now, you see, for the longest time, I had always had some issues. There was some die-off at the tips, and it was very common. It occurred pretty prolifically, but as a whole, the plant was very healthy. The leaves were super green. The harvest was abundant. In fact, we're easily going to get 100 pounds of peaches this year. You know, one of the things that I look at is, if it's a tiny problem, I don't really worry about it that much. But the thing is it started getting worse. And then just about a few days ago, I noticed a peach sitting on the ground, and I thought, oh man, we had a really heavy rain and some wind. And I thought, okay, all right, not too bad. I'm gonna bring it in, I'm gonna eat it, because I don't let fruit go to waste. Even if it's falling on the ground, I'll still cut it and cut out the bad spots, because that's just what I do. And I noticed something when I cut open the fruit. It was not a good sign. There was a maggot inside. And that maggot was the red flag. It was kind of the canary in the coal. Well, the canary in the coal mine was the dying off. That I should have noticed as a problem, but because I saw everything as healthy, I didn't really worry about it. But that dying off at the tips, that was the canary in the coal mine that told me I had a problem, but I let it go. And then that problem grew and proliferated, and that's what led to the maggots in the fruit. And so I'm here to tell you today, not only different ways to prevent it, but what is causing it. Because for the longest time, I literally passed it off as a possible just stress damage on the trees. It was actually a borer. The borer comes from the Oriental fruit moth, and the Oriental fruit moth actually originated in China, and it was brought over on accident in some cherries during the early 1900s. Somewhere between 1913 and 1933 is kind of where it is estimated to have entered the United States. And from there, it has really wreaked havoc on pretty much every stone fruit variety, including cherries, peaches, plums, apricots, and even almonds. This is a big issue, and one that I did not realize the magnitude of the issue until I started noticing how substantial the damage was. Once I actually took a step back and looked, I said to myself, we've got code red, I've got to take action now. So once I was able to identify the problem as the Oriental fruit moth, I then went into action as to how to prevent it. Even if I'm not preventing it this year, which is very unlikely, it's very unlikely for me to be able to 100% prevent it this year, or even prevent it remotely this year, I'm doing what I can do to reduce its numbers so that it's not finding this home to be hospitable, because once it finds a host plant, the Oriental fruit moth will actually stay by its host plant, because the life cycle occurs around the stone fruits themselves. So if you have them, the worst thing you can do is just say, let it just fix itself, because it won't. They won't just migrate someplace else. They're going to actually embed the larva into the tissue of the trees that will then obviously hatch in the early spring, that will then embed themselves in the young tissue early in the year. They will then hatch and then either lay eggs on the new tissue again, or lay eggs in the young fruit. And then that whole life cycle occurs over again. Then it will embed itself in the bark of damaged tissue, and then it will happen all over again. And it just this whole life cycle occurs time and time and time again. And so what we want to do is we want to take a very proactive approach to reduce the numbers if at all possible. The first thing we do is we remove the fruit. The first thing you can tell by damage signs is, like I said, the oozing pectin from the fruit. This is usually clear, or it's like stuff that is hardened is actually more of like an amber color. You can see this one is clear here, and this one here is more of an amber color. The next thing I did is I defoliated. and I defoliated heavily. What you want to do is you want to remove any branches that that have flagging occurring on them. Remember, flagging is the dying of the tips. Here's a good example of flagging. You can see there how the flagging actually only affects the top 1 or so inches of growth tip, and you can see right here there's a bit of a brown soft spot. That brown soft spot usually connects a wilted portion and a healthy portion. The problem is that generally the grub is actually somewhere down here on the branch, just a little bit past the wilting, surviving in the branch. Because this wilting right here is actually a natural stimulus that the tree will try to, where the grub enters, the tree, it's very ingenious, the tree will seal this off, trying to protect any water or bugs from getting in. It will seal this off, creating this hard little, that just dropped off, that hard little scab there. And that hard little scab creates a little cozy cocoon area that will be not only sealed from the back, but sealed from the healthy portion, so it can live in there totally free of any birds or other pests or predatory insects that want to find it. So it hides in that little cocoon there that happens naturally, and then what will happen is it will exit out the back, and you'll see a second exit hole later on. So that was the second thing that I did to reduce its numbers. I removed probably close to 150 to 200 branches that had flagging on them. Now the next thing you want to look for is wilting. The wilting is actually the stages just before the flagging occurs. Well, it's still flagging, but before you can identify it as flagging, it just looks like a wilting leaf. And the thing is, it's very difficult to identify because peach leaves are generally droopy as it is, but there's a definitive difference between a droopy leaf that's normal and a leaf that is about to go through flagging. And that's because the leaf will actually begin to shrivel, and it will look almost as if it's lacking severe water, and it will droop heavily, not just hang down like peach leaves do. It will actually kind of shrivel, and the growth tip at the very end of the peach will begin to shrivel and kind of close up on itself. That is the first sign you look for, and you go through and you clip all of that off. And that is a great way to make sure that you catch the problem early, because what can happen is often you can look for the brown scar that occurs, but then what happens is it creates almost an embryo inside, and it will hatch. And generally people will clip that off saying, I've fixed the problem and I'm gonna burn it. What happens is that generally that's like a past generation that has since healed over. So here's an example of some damaged tissue that was caught too late. You can see the entrance and the exit hole here. The entrance is at the softest part of the growth tip, and the exit hole here is where the larva crawled out. And what a lot of people do is they will simply clip this and say, I've solved the problem. What you really need to look for is that wilting. This is still damaged tissue. I recommend taking it off, but there's no grub in here. Now, the third way that you can help to eradicate this problem is to use beneficial insects. Beneficial insects such as predatory wasps will generally come in naturally when they can identify a pest that they like to use as a host. Predatory wasps will lay eggs inside of the larvae themselves that will then hatch out, much like predatory wasps affect tomato hornworms. Now, I was able to identify and take a picture of a predatory wasp coming in and landing on my peach tree, which was a great sign, but unfortunately there's not enough of them to really take care of the problem 100%. They do take care of some of the problem, and that's why I love organic methods, because you allow the organic organisms to come in and help aid the problem, or help aid in reducing the problem, I should say. And so I was able to take a picture of that, and these predatory wasps are wonderful. You can actually also purchase them online because they, you can release them in your orchard, and they will then find and seek those borers and eliminate them as well but they can be a little bit expensive. The fourth way that you can reduce the pest problem is by being proactive with sprays. What we recommend doing, and what is recommended to us, is using Bacillus Thuringiensis. Bacillus Thuringiensis, otherwise known as BT, is actually a bacteria that will affect the gut of the larva once it eats any tissue. Spray it on your plants as soon in spring, as soon as you see flowers. Once you see flowers opening and the flowers are beginning to drop, it's called petal drop, you want to spray heavily every 10 days. Because what you want to do is you want to ensure that that life cycle of the larva is cut short. It will eat through some of the tender tissue, hopefully containing the BT, and once it contains the BT, it will die, rendering the life cycle to be discontinued for that larva themselves. But then you want to follow up because, like I said, every 10 days there will be other, Oriental fruit moths flying into the area smelling the fruit. And that's where we get into the fifth way of reducing this pest, which is by using chemical masks. Chemical masks, otherwise known as essential oil sprays. This is a wonderful tip, and we've actually integrated this very well with our squash to prevent against squash vine borers. What we will be doing is using our squash vine borer spray. It's a mixture of almond oil, peppermint oil, and lemongrass oil that we then spray on the crops. And what will happen is the scent of the peaches will be masked so that any of the Oriental fruit moths that are flying over the area will then not be able to smell the peaches as well. Some might still land, but again, this is all you're building up to integrate as much stuff as you can into your pest management system. And that way you can better your chances of having as few on your plants as possible. And then the sixth method is through traps. Now, traps are not nearly as effective as I would hope they would be. Traps will affect, they'll catch one or two of the moths, and what that does is it allows you to know what life cycle the moths are currently in. If you're catching adults, you know that the adults are laying eggs, and when you catch the adults in the traps, you know that because the pheromones in the traps mimic a female, one of the female moths, what you want to do is you want to start spraying your trees at that point, because that's when you'll notice that the moths are laying eggs on the leaves because they're out on their mating flights. And the seventh and final way to help reduce the Oriental fruit moth damage on your fruits is to bag your fruits. What they've done is they've taken pantyhose or some type of soft mesh, like a very fine mesh cheesecloth, and they wrap their fruits and then use a rubber band or a zip tie around the base of the fruit so that it holds it secure. And what that does is it prevents the moth from laying eggs on any of the fruits, and it also prevents any of the larvae that exit the branch to crawl up and also burrow into the fruits themselves. The problem with that is that on a tree of this size, there's really no great way for me to go and bag all my fruits. There's just far too many of them. And so this method is definitely effective if you want to at least save some of your fruits, but it's not effective for large scale production. And that's where I would kind of more persuade you to use things like the beneficial or the essential oils, the BT, as well as defoliation to reduce them that way. So I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you learned something new. I hope you've learned with me on this journey, and I will definitely keep you all posted as we conquer this problem together. And starting next spring, I'll bring you all along for kind of the whole saga of preventing them, because next year we're going to have even bigger trees, even bigger harvests, and hopefully very few of the Oriental fruit moth. So as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel reminding you to grow bigger, go home. Catch you later. See ya. Bye.